Hello fellow exiles. Today, I would like to walk you through my Stormweaver build, which deletes Uber Arbiter in under 5 seconds. It's been more than a week since the league started, and I hope your league progression has been going smoothly. This build is constructed around 2 trigger-based meta skills, cast on Elemental Ailments, or CoEA, and cast on Critical, or CoC. For mapping, we use Frostbolt and Thunderstorm to trigger Spark in CoEA for better clearing. For bosses, we use Frostbolt and Frostwall to trigger Comet in CoC for quick kills. If you find this kind of guide useful, please consider subscribing. Now let me show you how the mechanics work. Frostbolt serves as our primary clearing skill. Now you might wonder why we don't just use Spark, since it has the best skill format for clearing among all spell skills. Cold-infused Spark damage even received a buff in 0.4. The problem comes from this league's significant downward adjustment of passive nodes related to reduction to movement speed penalty while casting. We simply cannot overcome the slow movement speed when casting Spark. Placing it in CoEA as a triggered skill both avoids this movement speed weakness and allows it to benefit from the cold-infused damage. Frostbolt offers another advantage. Spark has very low base damage and only 9% base critical hit chance. As a Stormweaver with modest investment, bringing Spark's damage to impressive levels is difficult. Frostbolt, however, has a 12% base critical hit chance, and as a trigger driver, it lets us more easily reach CoC's triggering threshold. Built-in chill and freeze effects are additional bonuses. Freeze effectively contributes energy for CoEA while creating safe space for damage output. The Snake Pit Ring's Spell Projectiles Cannot Pierce effect enables Frostbolt's terrain explosion directly, granting approximately 1.5 times damage bonus, which is quite substantial in early stages. It also makes Frostbolt's projectiles fork, making them synergize more conveniently with Frostwall. This interaction triggers our CoC payload, Comet linked with Living Bomb. Living Bomb provides the fire infusion needed to empower Comet consistently. Comet receives the fire-infused buff for a massive damage boost. Thunderstorm applies the Drench debuff to monsters. When linked with Shock Conduction 2 support gem, it can always apply shock to drenched enemies. This shock application method ignores enemies' ailment threshold entirely and is not tied to damage or shock chance. Thunderstorm's own decent hit frequency easily provides large amounts of energy for CoEA. We also utilize this guaranteed shock property combined with Stormweaver's Strike Twice Ascendancy node to consistently apply 2 shock debuffs to enemies without needing to worry about shock chance. Honestly, this interaction with Thunderstorm is a bit too overpowered, and I wouldn't be surprised if it gets nerfed in the future. Beyond the continuous trigger damage from CoEA and CoC, this build also utilizes a powerful burst combo through Spellslinger, an invocation skill provided by the Dueling Wand base. We socket Flame Wall, Orb of Storms, Eye of Winter, and Arbiter's Ignition into it in that order. When activated, Spellslinger releases all socketed skills instantly, without cast animation or movement speed penalty. Thanks to Arbiter's Ignition support, when this Eye of Winter combo ignites enemies, we receive a powerful Elemental Archon buff for 10 seconds. We can further combine the combo with Frostwall's Chilled Ground and Elemental Weaknesses' Ignited Ground to deliver damage that benefits from all 3 elemental damage types, plus Flamewall's added projectile flat damage. Eye of Winter has a 10-second cooldown, and Elemental Archon buff has a 30-second interval, so this works as both a boss opener burst and a panic button while mapping. As a build primarily focused on high-frequency skill triggering, ensuring mana sustain is an important topic. Beyond stacking mana cost efficiency modifiers and passive mana regeneration, this build mainly utilizes 2 methods to maintain mana. As a Stormweaver, we have Infusion Remnant generation and pickup range that other ascendancies cannot match. The Refracted Infusion and Storm's Recollection Ascendancy nodes provide us with far more infusion remnants than we need. Beyond using them to enhance skills, the Arcane Remnants passive lets us recover 3% of maximum mana each time we pick up a remnant. Our large pickup range means we can consistently obtain mana recovery from this interaction while triggering skills at high frequency. More importantly, GGG added several new power charge related passive clusters to the tree in this league. Among them, Infusion of Power cluster and Well of Power cluster are particularly valuable to us. Infusion of Power allows us to gain power charges when consuming infusions. Thanks to our ascendancy, our infusion acquisition is nearly endless, which essentially means our power charges are endless too. Honestly, this is a bit absurd. The Well of Power cluster lets us recover large amounts of mana when consuming power charges. By linking Frostwall with Creeping Chill support gem, and placing a low-level Enfeeble with Abiding Hex support, which consumes power charges to extend curse duration, in CoEA to trigger at high frequency, we achieve excellent mana sustain both during mapping and bossing. When triggering starts during boss fights, mana drains instantly, but recovers fairly quickly. The excess power charges can also be utilized by charge regulation, providing us with 24% more critical hit chance. Defense is not a strength of this build. Even though we've taken Chaos Inoculation and have around 6,000 energy shields, our damage mitigation is quite weak. For energy shield recovery, we mainly rely on the Jiquani's Thesis Soul Core, socketed in our gloves, which allows us to start energy shield recharge after consuming 2,000 mana, perfectly fitting our build. However, this Soul Core currently has extremely limited availability, dropping with a chance from the Soul Core boss in Atziri's Temple, and it's currently unclear if there are other ways to get it. If you cannot obtain it at the moment, you can consider replacing the charge regulation skill with Convalescence. We also rely on Temporal Chains in our Blasphemy aura as a defensive measure. This combination can slow nearby enemies by up to around 40%. Together with our Frostbolt's Chill and Freeze, we can ensure good crowd control in most situations. Against bosses, we mainly rely on our own positioning and the freeze provided by Comet to ensure survival. Since we need to keep multiple meta skills active simultaneously, we require a substantial amount of spirit. Our offhand needs to carry a Sceptre. The Shrine Sceptre base, besides providing a resistance aura that helps with capping our resistances, also allows us to link support gems that normally require spirit to function without consuming spirit. This saves 80 spirit while enjoying these beneficial effects. This is a bug that has existed since PoE 2's launch, but has never been fixed, and has become an established trick. I won't go into detail about each support gem connection. Please refer to the table on screen, or check the POB link in the description. With the core mechanics covered, let's look at how to actually play this build. While mapping, we adopt a mobile casting approach, alternating between Frostbolt and Thunderstorm while moving. Spark and Comet, triggered from CoEA and CoC, handle the damage. When encountering rare monsters, cast Thunderstorm toward them to apply shock, then Frostwall, and use Frostbolt to break the Frostwall, triggering Comet in CoC to finish the kill. Since energy acquisition for CoEA and CoC relates to monster power, during mapping, you'll more frequently see Spark triggered by CoEA, while Comet from CoC will only fall more frequently when fighting rare mobs. The bossing rotation is slightly more complex. First, we need to ensure Spellslinger is fully charged at 100%. Spellslinger builds energy when we cast other spells like Frostbolt. When ready, the icon lights up with a number indicating we can activate it. We can achieve this by casting Frostbolt in the air before the boss fight. When the boss fight begins, we first cast Sigil of Power from the offhand Chiming Staff, then continuously cast Elemental Weakness Curse toward the boss, while pressing our mana flask to drink, rapidly draining mana to stack Sigil of Power stages for more spell damage. Stop at 3 stacks, as our subsequent skill triggers will naturally reach 4 stacks. Cast Elemental Weakness Curse toward the boss once more, then press Thunderstorm twice to apply the shock debuff. Cast Frostwall toward the boss, then immediately cast Spellslinger to deliver the Eye of Winter combo. The boss will be ignited by Eye of Winter and will gain the powerful Elemental Archon buff. Now begin the cycle of casting Frostwall, breaking it with Frostbolt, then casting Frostwall again, inserting 1 or 2 Thunderstorm casts in between until the boss is killed. During this process, the fire-infused Comet in CoC will be triggered at high frequency by Frostwall, and the cold-infused Spark in CoEA will also be triggered at high frequency by our skills. Mana might be drained to a low level, but thanks to our Remnant pickup mana recovery and power charge consumption mana recovery, actual mana is still recovering at high speed, so there's no need to worry about being unable to cast skills due to empty mana. Now let's talk about the gear that makes this work. The main hand on weapon set 1 carries a dueling wand. As mentioned earlier, this wand base provides the Spellslinger skill we use for our Eye of Winter combo. The prefixes should have 1 gained extra damage plus 2 damage increased modifiers. The suffixes must have 1 plus to levels of all cold spell skills mod. The remaining 2 modifiers are ideally cast speed and critical hit chance, but these are quite expensive. Choosing mana cost efficiency like I did also works. Our offhand needs a high spirit scepter, specifically a shrine scepter base, so we can get one of 3 elemental resistance auras while enjoying the effects of 4 support gems without consuming spirit. The scepter's modifiers don't have many requirements, just high spirit with maximum mana and intelligence. This build requires a total of 312 spirit. Weapon set 2 is a chiming staff, only requiring cast speed and plus to levels of all spell skills. Nothing else matters. We only need its Sigil of Power skill to buff ourselves before boss fights. The helmet prioritizes high energy shields with resistances and ideally critical hit chance as a suffix. It needs to socket an Idol of Ishtar to gain 12% increased cost efficiency. The amulet requires the plus to levels of all spell skills modifier, while also needing increased maximum energy shield and increased critical hit chance. Maximum mana and intelligence are also very useful. Anoint conservative casting for mana cost efficiency. Snake Pit goes in the left ring slot. As explained earlier, this provides the projectiles cannot pierce effect that enables Frostbolt's terrain explosion and makes projectiles fork. The right ring needs to prioritize cast speed, resistances, and maximum mana modifiers. Body armor prioritizes high energy shields with spirit and resistances. Nightscale unique gloves provide 150% increased mana regeneration only if we've crit recently. Since we're maintaining high crit chance, this is always active during combat. We also get some increased critical hit chance and intelligence, which are great bonuses. In case you want to regenerate mana when there are no mobs around, just cast Frostwall and break it with Frostbolt to start mana regeneration. The gloves socket the Jiquani's Thesis soul core mentioned earlier. The belt uses Darkness Enthroned. Make sure to get the version that treats sockets as gloves, with at least 100% increased effect of socketed items modifier. This way we can socket cast speed runes and increased magnitude of non-damaging ailments runes on it, getting 16% increased cast speed and up to 60% increased magnitude of non-damaging ailments, which for us as Stormweavers means substantial increased shock magnitude. Boots prioritize high movement speed with resistances. Also, make sure to equip a Bearer's Anguish charm to deal with the very fierce ignite damage in this league. Now let's quickly look at the passive tree. For Ascendancy nodes, we take Refracted Infusion and Storm's Recollection for enormous Infusion Remnant generation and sustain. We also take Constant Gale for the Arcane Surge buff and Strike Twice for the ability to apply 2 shock debuffs to enemies simultaneously. We use Weapon Set 1 for damage and crit and Weapon Set 2 for curses. In the starting area, apart from the Energy Shield nodes and crit nodes, we need to take the Arcane Remnants and the Efficient Casting Cluster, important for our mana sustain. We take conservative casting through Amulet Anointment, as mentioned earlier. Then, Shock Magnitude nodes on Weapon Set 1, and 2 area clusters for Curse on Weapon Set 2. Then turn this way, take Self-Mortification for Stun Threshold, and the Dynamism cluster for triggered spell-related bonus. Back to the Jewel socket here, for Sapphires in this build, look for those offering critical hit chance and shock, as well as ailment magnitude. The nearby Everlasting Infusions cluster helps with our infusion sustain even more, and synergizes perfectly with the Infusion of Power node, allowing us to generate an excessive amount of power charges. We can recover 9% of our maximum mana every time a power charge is consumed, thanks to the Well of Power cluster, which, along with a few other nodes in the circle, were made possible to access without pathing using the From Nothing Jewel for Mind over Matter. Back this way, we allocate the Cold skill cluster for a good performance boost. Then take the Whispers of Doom keystone so that both our Elemental Weakness and Temporal Chains in Blasphemy can affect monsters at the same time. The Curse Magnitude and Skill Effect Duration nodes are also important. Then turn to the right side, we allocate Chaos Inoculation to get Chaos and Bleeding immunity at the cost of making maximum life at 1. Invocated Efficiency Cluster for triggered spell damage increase, and a little bit more mana cost efficiency. Heavy Frost allows us to ignore non-negative elemental resistance of frozen enemies, along with Thin Ice offering a great deal of damage potential. You can refer to the POB for passive tree details. Recommended level is 84 or above. There is also a link to Mobalytics for those who prefer to see things on that site. That wraps up the build. Overall, this is a very solid caster build, capable of completing all endgame content except the highest difficulty Simulacrum. The core idea is achieving more with less, winning through quantity over quality, making up for early equipment's numerical shortcomings through high-frequency spell triggers. Although this is a build based on the classic cold caster archetype, during the optimization process, I've seen Stormweaver's strong potential in 0.4, especially Thunderstorm's forced shock mechanism and the power charge consumption tech for mana recovery, giving Stormweaver builds a higher ceiling. I look forward to developing even more powerful mana stacking builds based on this foundation later in the league. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Please consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.